Joining us now for his perspective, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. Alan, thanks very much for your time on this Friday.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you. I wish it were a happier occasion, but you really can't expect anybody to negotiate with a group that seeks its destruction by violence. If people should Google the Hamas Charter, which has never been revised or revoked, and it calls for, death to the Jews. It says the Jews started the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution and every bad thing in the drug trade, and Jews are terrible people, and the obligation is to kill them wherever you see them. The idea of making peace with a government that includes Hamas, the United States government rejects. The United States government has supported Israel's decision to stop peace talks so long as the peace talks are with a government that includes Hamas, without Hamas accepting the right of Israel to exist and UN Charter resolutions and all of that. But, people have to remember the big picture. Remember how Israel got the West Bank. They got it because Jordan attacked them. Israel tried desperately in '67 to tell the Jordanians not to attack, saying they wouldn't capture an inch of land. But the Jordanians attacked them, and Israel captured the land. And it's the Palestinians who want it now. They're the ones who have to come to the negotiating table. They're not in an equal position, politically, morally, diplomatically, militarily, or in any other way. And the idea that they're making it difficult by threatening to join various UN bodies, by threatening to go to the International Criminal Court, by joining with Hamas, they're just not going to get their land unless they come to the table and negotiate. That's the only way they're going to get it. They're not going to get it militarily. They're not going to get it diplomatically. They're not going to get it through the BDS, boycott, divest, sanction movement. They're going to only get it by direct negotiations. They should be the ones that have the greatest interest in negotiating.
Alan, how surprising a development was this? Or is this something that has been murmured about, or there was buzz about it for a long, long time?
Well, it's always been a card that the Palestinians have threatened to play. A lot of analysts, both in the Palestinian Authority and in Israel, now think that it was a tactic used by Abbas that backfired. He thought that the threat to do it would bring Israel to giving into some of the demands of the Palestinians, but it's backfired. For there to be peace, the Palestinians have to come and say, look, we are prepared to give up the right of return. We're prepared to allow for Israel's security to be protected. Israel can't accept another Gaza. Israel left the Gaza. It left it unilaterally. It said, it's yours, folks. It left behind all the farm equipment, the hothouses, the agricultural. It could have turned, the Palestinians could have turned Gaza into another Singapore. But instead, they turned it over to Hamas, and there have been rocket attacks virtually every month, sometimes daily. And Israel can't do the same on the West Bank because the West Bank is very close to the major airport, the Ben Gurion airport. And if Hamas or radicals take over on the West Bank, they could bring Israel to an economic halt by ending tourism, by ending commerce. So Israel has to protect its own security, and the United States supports that. We all wish that both sides would be a little bit more accommodating and agreeable, but there's no moral equivalence here. And the Palestinians are the ones who have to come to the bargaining table and seek reconciliation. After the '67 war, Abu Ibn put it very well. Israel offered to give back all the land in exchange just for peace and recognition. Palestinians turned them down. And Abu Ibn said this is the first war where the victors are suing for peace and the losers are demanding unconditional surrender. And that's been true for the last 50 or almost 50 years. And there has to be a recognition that the Arabs have attacked Israel numerous times. They've lost. You have to pay a price when you've attacked civilians and you've lost the war. And there's been an occupation. The United States occupied Japan and occupied Germany after the Second World War. There were major territorial shifts in Poland, in Czechoslovakia. That's the reality. When the Nazis attacked, they lost territory. The same thing is true with the Palestinians and the Arabs in the Middle East, and there has to be an international recognition of that. This is not a morally equivalent dispute over land.
Well, Professor, I want to get your reaction quickly. John Kerry has come out and said that they are still hoping that these peace talks will resume at some point in the future, but he has spent so much time on this particular issue as Secretary of State. Is this a slap in the face to Secretary Kerry, or a sign that he was not able to get anything done, or is this more really just par for the course for the Palestinians?
Look, I have nothing but praise for my old friend John Kerry, who I've known since he was a young prosecutor. He has so much energy. He's devoted so much effort to this. You've got to give him an A+ for effort. Nobody else has been able to do this. George Mitchell, who's probably the world's greatest negotiator, who brought about the Northern Ireland peace treaty, was not able to do this. It's very, very difficult, but you couldn't have a better person in there trying hard. I know, because I know Benjamin Netanyahu very well, I know that Bibi Netanyahu has tremendous respect for John Kerry, and I know about for John Kerry. So he's the guy who can bring something about if there's a will on the part of the Palestinians to do it. But I think what's happened is the boycott, divest, sanction movement, which is spreading around college campuses, has made it more difficult for the Palestinians to come to the negotiating table and make peace, because they think they may get a better deal if they wait. But they're not going to get a better deal. And the BDS movement has made it much more difficult to bring about peace, and as have the United Nations actions, because it's given the Palestinians what they want without demanding of the Palestinians that they give anything in return.
Alan, you mentioned the efforts of John Kerry as Secretary of State. It is worth noting that his old colleague in the U.S. Senate across the aisle, Lindsey Graham, condemning this move by the Palestinians, despite what you're talking about on many college campuses. We're seeing a situation where there remains strong bipartisan support for Israel. Why do you believe this doesn't seem to resonate with the Palestinian leadership?
Well, I think they know that. Look, Lindsey Graham, I had my differences with him when we were arguing about President Clinton's impeachment, but he has become an absolutely first-rate, great senator, and, he's brought people together, and his support for Israel has been very, very strong. I think the Palestinians know that. What they are counting on is France and Germany and maybe England and the UN to be supportive on the other side. Also, Russia is flexing its muscles, and the Palestinians are saying, hey, Russia's flexing its muscles. Maybe that weakens America. Maybe it puts where we're better off not making peace. The situation is changing geopolitically. So even what's going on in the Ukraine has an impact on what's going on in the Middle East. The world really is flat, and it's a single, there are single elements to it. And the Obama administration has unfortunately shown weakness when it came to Iran, when it comes to the Middle East, now in Japan. And we need a strong president in a bipartisan way. We need a strong president. We need a strong foreign policy. And that will help bring about peace as well.
Well, Alan, you mentioned this, and you mentioned Iran, and we have about a minute and a half left. We had an expert on the other day saying that in his estimation, the buzz he is hearing is that Iran will announce its nuclear capabilities, or at least it'll be made known within the next 2 months. This particular observer said for all intents and purposes he believes Iran has nuclear weapons. What is your take on the possibility of an Iranian bomb?
Well, it won't happen because Israel won't let it happen. Even if Israel has to go to it alone, there are red lines that if they're crossed. Now the question is, can Israel spot the crossing? They did in Syria, and they did in Iraq. If they see the Iranians crossing a red line, they have no choice. They cannot tolerate nuclear-armed Iran that has sworn to destroy Israel. Remember, this is a country whose moderate leader, Rafsanjani, some years ago said, if we get the bomb and bomb Tel Aviv, we'll kill 3 million Jews, and they will retaliate and kill 20 million Muslims. And the trade-off, he said, is worth it, because there are more of us than them. We will destroy Israel, and Islam will survive. A country like that can't be allowed to have nuclear weapons, and Israel is simply not going to allow it to happen.
Alan Dershowitz, on that somewhat ominous note, we always appreciate your assessment, and it's your chance now to weigh in on Israel and the PLO and what may transpire in the Middle East. You can tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum. We're coming back.